So USDA has been trying to mandate these little boogers, RFID tags. Also, because there's different kinds of them now, there's EID tags is what they're called, I guess. But it was radio frequency identification. Now it's electronic identification. But they've been trying to get those in all cows' ears for the past 20 years now. They've been trying to push it. How they work is you get them in their ear, and then once they're scanned, it can hooks to a computer program, and you can input any sort of information you'd like to about each individual animal. The reason they give to do it is so that we can trace all diseases, trace a disease outbreak back to the origins, and we can know which cattle got mixed with which, and we can stop a disease outbreak. And the pushback has come from cattle guys who don't like to be told what to do and who are always skeptical of the USDA for good reason, because what the USDA really is just a regulatory arm of big ag corporations. And in cattle, it's beef packers. Those are the big ag corporations, or the corporate feed yards that feed out hundreds of thousands of head of cattle. And these would be real handy for both the beef packers and those corporate feed yards to have. And over the years, the pushback has been, we've said this is just going to create value for the beef packer, while it will not, and while the cattle guys are going to have to pay for the tags and pay for the value to be created, and they really won't get anything in return. And where that value will come from is by opening up export markets. If we use these tags and we can verify age, source, vaccination history, it'll open up a lot more export markets for the beef packers and create a lot of value. And the trouble is there's guys who are already doing this with these EID tags, and they're creating a lot of value for the beef packer, and the beef packer has to pay them premium prices for those cattle that are, antibiotic free, hormone free, all that kind of stuff that can be verified through affidavits and all kinds of paperwork. And those cattle sell for more to the beef packer. But once these things are mandated, those programs really won't be needed anymore, because what can happen with these, so once an animal walks off that truck into the beef packer, it can walk right past a scanner. That scanner hooked to a computer, which brings up all the information that's ever been entered in one of these. And so then they can sort there however they like. And so now the latest USDA is trying to get their toe in the door, really. They've decided they're not going to mandate it for all cattle, but they're going to say animals over 30 months old that are crossing state lines are going to have these tags. Well, the guys who run animals that are over 30 months old are the guys who are breeding cattle, and they're the guys who are tagging every calf that hits the ground. And so once they get used to using these, I'm sure the next mandate down the road, how the government works, is they're just going to expand what information has to be on the tag once they get everybody using the tags. And what this did, I've been looking into this, and I've been looking into other things, and it kind of brought it together to me. And I don't know if this is USDA's plan, or if this just happens to kind of work out perfectly for the beef packer if these things get mandated. And that is this ESG movement, or whatever, that these corporations are adopting. And you've heard, it's been in the news a lot more lately, because the SEC is mandated, or they proposed a rule where every public corporation is going to have one of these ESG reports. And what that is your environmental, social governance. And your environmental is your greenhouse gases, socials, your diversity and inclusive reports, and then the governance is who's on your board of directors, what are your corporate policies to enforce this kind of stuff. And the main thing this really is going to affect is the E part is going to affect agriculture, because what's involved in these ESG reports that'll tie back into this tag is what's called Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, and that's what the ESG report is made up of. And scope 1 is your greenhouse gas emissions. You have to calculate that and come up with a plan to reduce it. Scope 2 is the amount of electricity you're using. The same thing, you have to calculate it and try to reduce it. And scope 3 is where everybody that sells cattle to Tyson Foods, and then on the other end buys beef from Tyson Foods or Cargill. Both Tyson Foods and Cargill already have these ESG plans in place. They're filling out reports every year on their ESG score. They get scored on it. But what scope 3 is you have to, anyone supplying beef to Tyson Foods or Cargill is going to have to calculate their greenhouse gas emissions and come up with their plan to reduce it. And so with the SEC's trying to mandate this rule, that means anyone selling beef or even grain, you know, Cargill buys a lot of grain, you're going to have be able to calculate your greenhouse gas emissions and submit a report in order to do business with these corporations. And whether it's mandated or not by the SEC, both of these corporations already have this plan in place. And in Tyson Foods, I wrote it down here, in Tyson, what they wrote for their scope 3. So I think they instituted this in 2021. So now they're in their second year or third year of doing these ESG deals. And what they wrote in their report for scope 3 is Tyson Foods will also refine scope 3 estimates and goals as supplier data and standardized methodologies for calculations across industry sectors become available. So supplier data, standardized methodology for calculation across industry sectors becomes available. That's what this is. And so that's what makes this really easy. Once these things get mandated, then they're going to mandate you calculate your greenhouse gas emissions. And so the reason these companies are doing this, these corporations are doing this, a lot of people think it's consumer, you know, the consumers must be pushing for it, but it's not at all consumer driven. It's shareholder driven. And the three biggest corporations that are really pushing for these deals are BlackRock. They're investment funds, and so they're the biggest shareholders in a lot of these corporations, including Tyson Foods. The largest shareholders in Tyson Foods are number 1 BlackRock, number 2 Vanguard, and number 3 State Street. And those three investment funds are the main drivers of this ESG movement. And together, those three corporations, those three funds, control around $22 trillion, and which is almost as much as the U.S. GDP is just over $23 trillion. And so they have a massive amount of funds available and power over these corporations. And so as the top shareholders, they come in and say, this is what you have to do. And then these corporations have to do it. And what's pretty crazy about that is, and also gives evidence to how this is going to work, is last month Tyson Foods came out with a new beef line called Brazen Beef. And their claim to fame, or their claim, is that it uses 10% less greenhouse gas, creates 10% less greenhouse gas emissions in their beef. And my regenerative friends and grass-fed friends are going to love this, because the people that they've partnered with to create this climate-friendly beef is a massive corporate cattle feeder called Adams Land and Cattle, who have around 250,000. They have 250,000 cattle backgrounding in their cattle feeding operation. And so these cattle, creating less greenhouse gases, are getting fed in a traditional feedlot. But the way that they say they're creating less greenhouse gases is how the feed is being farmed, meaning they're using cover crops and no-till. And how Adams Land and Cattle calculate or keep track of these their greenhouse gas emissions is they do it with EID tags. They've been all in on these EID tags for years, and they've actually came up with their own software for reading the tags that says on their website every animal that they buy, as soon as it shows up, gets an EID tag and starts getting this verification and information entered. And so the deadline to comment on the proposed rule for the USDA, which would mandate cattle over 30 months to get all these tags, and like I said, I think that's just getting their toe in the door to where they mandate them all, because that's what they've always really wanted to do. And so you can go, I'm going to put a link in the description here, and I'm going to put a link to an art. I wrote all this out and put links to all this information. You can read Cargill's Scope 3 report, Tyson Foods Scope 3 or ESG reports, and you can see how the SEC proposed this rule around last May, and they're supposed to be coming out here within the next couple of weeks with like the official rule. And if agriculture is included in that, it is going to cause all kinds of problems, and people really being pissed about it. So anyway, yeah, comment on that rule, make sure this thing doesn't go through, and like, subscribe, share the video, get everybody you know to watch it, and stay tuned. Adios.